My name is Erin Sorenson. I'm with Third Stage Consulting. I've been doing this work for the past 10 years. I've worked on over 50 film projects to date. I'm here in lovely Ventura, California, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk with you about impact producing. The short answer is that impact producers are generally concerned about having the right butt in the seat versus the number of butts in the seat. So what I mean by that is that we're focusing on the right people that can hear the message of the film versus the number of people that are showing up in a theater, for example. When I come into a new campaign, I'm often a fresh set of eyes. And so I'm looking at your story from an outsider's perspective, who's also looking to see what kind of impact the story might have. So the question that I'm going to ask you as a filmmaker is, why did you tell this story? What was the story that captured your curiosity in a way that you were willing to stay with it through thick and thin to where you are right now in terms of being at the end of production or close to it? Because that curiosity is what will drive the impact campaign, because my goal is to take an audience through the same arc that you went through, from being curious about an issue, through feeling like they know something, they have empathy towards the issue, potentially outrage, and have a call to action. Some impact producers have a background in film, but many don't. My background personally is in social work. I worked in that field for about 15 years with other organizations, trying to bring other organizations together to collaborate on behalf of child abuse victims. And so that's a skill set in terms of bringing people together that have disparate kind of motives or missions, and developing collaborations towards a single goal. Other impact producers have backgrounds in international relations, public policy, psychology, some in public relations, and typically larger consultancies will have a diverse background, specifically in public relations, marketing, distribution. Impact producers set themselves up for work in multiple ways. Some are independent consultants, some run small businesses, and others are, as I mentioned before, a larger firm. Some impact producers that are community activists or issue experts may actually be embedded in a nonprofit organization and dedicated within that organization to work on this campaign. I've set myself up as a small business, Third Stage Consulting. I've set myself up that way because it allows me to hire people as needed on campaigns, and I also work with a number of consultants that are experts in other areas. So I consider myself a campaign and strategy expert, and have worked on over 50 campaigns at this point over the past 9 years. All of us as impact producers are often drawn towards certain areas, and the areas I'm most drawn to are those of political, economic, and social oppression. So a lot of the films I've worked on are around homelessness, family violence, women in prison, post-traumatic stress disorder, veterans, mental illness, etc. One of the questions I'm commonly asked is, what's the difference between an impact campaign and a community outreach campaign? The way I think about it is that an impact campaign is a capital I impact, and community outreach is largely a lowercase I impact. And that's definitely not to dismiss community outreach, because it's incredibly important. But the capital I impact campaign is really there to, it's designed to disrupt, challenge, change some level of public policy. So those campaigns are very public driven. Small I impact campaigns are audience driven. They're looking to reach the right audience, to validate their work, increase resources, etc., but they aren't measurable in a way that a strategic, goal-oriented campaign is. One example of a legislative campaign that I worked on is Almost Sunrise, a film about two veterans that walk across the country in an attempt to deal with their post-traumatic stress disorder. One of the discoveries that they make along the way is the benefit of alternative types of medicine, such as meditation, breathing, hiking, outdoor therapies. There happened to be legislation that was pending in the Department of Veterans Affairs that would allow for alternative medicines, alternative self-care techniques to be supported financially through Veterans Administration hospitals. So we partnered with the legislator that was promoting and trying to pass this legislation to do private legislative screenings for the entire department. And so that's one way of using a film to achieve a certain measurable goal. It's important to know that no single impact producer is likely to be able to fulfill all the roles that are needed through an impact campaign. So the first area of work is typically around strategic management, strategic planning. Strategic planning is really an opportunity for the filmmaker and the team to start to map out their goals, objectives, timelines, and budget. The second area of work is the day-to-day management of the campaign. Very often that's fulfilled by the film producer and not an impact producer, but like I said, all situations are different, but often that's a role that's fulfilled by the producer because it really has to do with day-to-day management and oversight of timelines and budget. Some impact producers also assist with fundraising in the sense of grants and foundations, which may include grant research, helping the team with grant research and grant writing or review. One of the really exciting areas of the work, I think, is around leveraging distribution, broadcast, theatrical, and premieres. Sometimes impact producers get involved in audience building, and other times they might be involved in setting up panels with their NGO partners for those sort of public screening events and even broadcasts. And other times you can get really creative with this work. For example, one film that I worked on, Private Violence, which was about a domestic violence shelter, that film had its premiere on HBO. And so what we did when we had one of our meetings with HBO is we asked them if they would be willing to open up their subscription codes for domestic violence shelters on the night of the premiere. And they said yes, it wasn't a problem at all. So what that allowed us to do was to offer free screenings on HBO to domestic violence shelters across the U.S. that wouldn't have otherwise had access to the film. Community outreach and educational engagement are also really important parts of the campaign. It allows the film strategically to get into audiences that need to see the film. Sometimes it's referred to as impact distribution. A couple of caveats with that is that it's really important for filmmakers as you're developing your contracts with especially distributors and broadcasters that this be really defined in that contract so that you can have the space to do the space and the time to do a community outreach campaign, and that it's not seen as something that's going to conflict or compete with distribution and broadcasts. One of the questions I'm always asked is, are impact campaigns expensive? The answer, of course, is that it depends. I will say that in my experience of 50 films or more, that I've only worked on one campaign where the funding was present at the beginning of the campaign. So going into that, I think about different phases and different places in which the money will need to be there. So the first phase obviously is strategic planning, to come up with a strategic plan that really identifies vision, goals, objectives, timelines, budgets, evaluation points, that's going to cost between $2,000 and $5,000, depending on, again, the extent and the complexity of your campaign. Some of the factors that are going to influence how much your campaign is going to cost will be clearly the length of the campaign. The longer the campaign, the more complex the goals are, the more expensive that's going to be. Some of the major cost drivers throughout the campaign, no matter what type of campaign you have, will be your salary, which I definitely would encourage you as filmmakers to put in. It's often the last thing that you think of, but it should be in there, especially if you're going to be spending time working on the impact campaign. And the second, then, of course, are going to be your consultants, the people that are going to be hired to work with you, your impact producer, social media coordinator, maybe a public relations person, an evaluator, someone who's going to develop your curriculum, folks like that. Then there are hard costs to consider that include the amount of travel that will be involved in your campaign. If you have educational goals and you want to use your film in universities, classrooms, etc., you're often going to be asked to have a cut down that's going to be 45 minutes to 60 minutes because it has to be used in sort of classroom bites. That clearly is expensive because it's going to require more editing. So those are largely the major goals. Every campaign's a little bit different, but those are the major cost drivers to think through about how much your campaign's going to cost. To wrap it up, I'd just like to give a few observations of my personal experience working as an impact producer, especially around challenges and the joys of the work. Clearly, the challenge is similar to the challenge that you as filmmakers experience around financial sustainability. And I think the other challenge that might even be a little bit trickier is how do we take care of ourselves as we're doing impact work and making films with very vulnerable subjects and very difficult topics. For me, therapy has been very helpful, as well as having very generous friends and families that will allow me to process sadness, outrage, and hope. Relative to the challenges, the benefits to doing this work and the joys that I experience and some of the life-changing experiences that I've had working on these films is pretty enormous. One of the things that I really enjoy about it is I absolutely love documentaries. So it's a great excuse to be completely immersed in them and immersed in the projects themselves and the process of filmmaking. The other is that I have a really sincerely deep respect and honoring and love often for artists. And it's a joy for me to be able to advocate for them because often y'all are pretty humble and not willing to stand up for the needs that you have, especially once the film is done. So I love the aspect of being able to represent artists and their art and advocating for them. And really the final, I think, and most significant to me and heartfelt is I really love working with film subjects and the folks that you have chose to tell these stories around because I think they're amazing, they're brave, and they're inspirational. So that has really been, I think for me, one of the most rewarding aspects about being an impact producer. So with that, I really just want to sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, wish you great success on your films, great success on your impact campaigns. And I do believe, honestly, having lived to the end of many campaigns, you will make a change for the better. The world will be better because of you and because of the film that you have brought into the world.